Imagine discovering a horrifying family secret, so devastating it drives a preacher to commit an unthinkable act. A betrayal so twisted, it shatters everything he believes in, destroying a lifetime of trust in an instant. This is the story of Pastor Elijah King, a man whose faith and family were his entire world until one brutal truth turned his life upside down. Welcome to True Crime IQ. Thank you, my viewers. Thank you for joining me as we unravel the chilling stories that keep us questioning the limits of trust, love, and betrayal. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest gripping tales. Stay tuned, because this is a story you won't forget. Let's begin. Pastor Elijah King, 42, was the embodiment of devotion in his small Florida community. Known for his fiery sermons on faith, family, and moral values, Elijah's ministry attracted hundreds of followers who saw him as a beacon of righteousness. His dedication to his church and family earned him widespread admiration. To many, Elijah wasn't just a preacher. He was the living example of the virtues he preached. At his side was Naomi King, 38, his graceful and composed wife. Naomi balanced her roles as a preacher's wife and the mother of their 5 children effortlessly. Abigail, 16, Elijah Jr., 14, Noah, 12, Sophie, 9, and Micah, 6, all adored her. Naomi's presence in the community was constant. She led Sunday school, organized charity drives, and supported Elijah's ministry at every turn. Together, they appeared to be a family blessed by faith, living a life others could only aspire to. At the heart of their spiritual foundation was Deacon Henry King, Elijah's 65-year-old father. A respected elder in the church, Henry had spent decades serving as a moral compass for the congregation. His influence on Elijah's upbringing was profound. From a young age, Henry instilled in his son a deep reverence for God, a commitment to family, and an unwavering adherence to Scripture. Elijah often credited his father during sermons, praising him as the rock upon which their family had been built. The King household was vibrant with activity. Abigail, the eldest, was thoughtful and academically driven, often helping with church youth programs. Elijah Jr. was quiet but dependable, always eager to assist during church services. Noah brought a playful, curious energy to the family, while Sophie was sensitive and eager to please. Micah, the youngest, was the light of the family, blissfully unaware of life's complexities and adored by everyone. Sunday dinners at Henry's house were a cherished family tradition. These gatherings began with scripture readings and heartfelt prayers led by Henry himself. The conversations that followed were lively, filled with discussions about the church and community. For Elijah, these moments symbolized the strong bond that connected the King family and their shared dedication to faith. One evening, as the family gathered around the oak dining table, Abigail excitedly shared an idea for her school project. For my genealogy project, I thought it would be fun if we all did a DNA test. We could learn about our ancestry and maybe even find distant relatives. Her siblings buzzed with excitement, speculating about hidden royal bloodlines or mysterious origins. Elijah, ever supportive of his children's pursuits, smiled warmly. That sounds like a great idea. It'll be a fun family activity and good for your project. Across the table, Naomi's smile faltered. She reached for her glass of water, her fingers trembling slightly. I don't know, Abby, she said softly. These things aren't always accurate. They can be invasive. Her voice trailed off as she glanced at Henry, whose stern expression remained unchanged. Come on, Naomi, Elijah said, brushing off her hesitation. What's the harm? It's just a fun activity, and we've got nothing to hide. He placed a reassuring hand over hers. Naomi hesitated for a moment, her expression unreadable, before nodding slowly. All right, she whispered. The children cheered as Elijah ordered the DNA kits. Henry gave a tight smile but said nothing, sipping his coffee in silence. A few weeks later, the DNA results arrived. Abigail eagerly gathered everyone around the computer as Elijah logged into the website. The room buzzed with excitement as they explored their ancestral origins and distant relatives. But as Elijah scrolled through the results, his brow furrowed. Wait, he said, leaning closer to the screen. This says I'm not a match to any of the kids as their biological father. He laughed nervously, shaking his head. That's obviously a mistake. Probably some kind of database error. Naomi froze, her hand tightening around the edge of the chair. Henry's gaze flicked to Elijah, his face calm but his jaw visibly clenched. I'll reach out to the company, Elijah said, his voice firm but composed. They probably just mixed up the data. He stood from the table and kissed Naomi on the top of her head. "Don't worry about it. I'll get it sorted out." Over the next few days, Elijah contacted the genealogy company, pointing out the error in their report. Confident they would correct it, he awaited their response. But when it came, it left him reeling. "We've triple-checked the results," the representative explained. "There's no mistake. The children's biological father is someone other than you, and the markers match another close relative within your submitted samples." Elijah's heart sank. He asked them to confirm again, but the answer remained the same. The only possible match within the submitted samples was his father, Henry. The weight of the revelation crushed him. Memories flooded his mind. Henry's frequent visits, Naomi's quiet resistance to the DNA test, and subtle moments he had dismissed as insignificant. It all began to make horrifying sense. That evening, Elijah confronted Naomi. Throwing the printed DNA results onto the table, he demanded, "Explain this." His voice was cold and sharp. Naomi's eyes darted to the papers, then to Elijah. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The DNA results," Elijah snapped. "They say I'm not the father of my children, but they also say there's another match in our family. Care to explain that?" Naomi's face paled as she clutched the back of the chair for support. "There must be a mistake," she stammered. "That can't be right." "Don't lie to me, Naomi," Elijah said, his voice rising. "I went back to the company. They verified it. There's no mistake. So, I'll ask you again. Explain this." Naomi broke down, tears streaming down her face as she sank into the chair. Through sobs, she confessed a dark secret she had kept buried for years. Early in their marriage, Henry had coerced her into a sexual relationship. His influence and authority made her feel powerless to resist, and the abuse had continued for years. "All 5 of them," Naomi whispered, her voice breaking. "They're all his. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't want to destroy you." Elijah staggered back, the room spinning around him. The woman he loved and the father he revered had shattered his life in the most personal and devastating way imaginable. He stormed out of the house, his mind a storm of rage, betrayal, and disbelief. This rewritten section ensures clarity, emotional depth, and readability while setting the stage for the next part. Let me know if you'd like any changes before we proceed. Elijah entered the room silently, his eyes dark and emotionless, a kitchen knife concealed in his grip. Naomi looked up, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and hope. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know you're hurt, but we can—" "Don't," he interrupted, his voice low and icy. "Don't you dare try to fix this with words. You've destroyed everything, Naomi. Everything." Naomi stood, wringing her hands as tears streamed down her face. "I was trapped, Elijah," she pleaded. "I didn't know how to stop it. I never wanted to hurt you." Elijah's laugh was sharp and bitter, cutting through her words like the knife he gripped. "You didn't want to hurt me? You let him violate our marriage, father my children, and sit at our table as if nothing was wrong. You lied to me every single day, Naomi." She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, Elijah. I love you. I love you. We can fix this. Fix this." Elijah snapped, his rage finally erupting. "This can't be fixed. You've condemned me to live a lie, and now you'll pay for it." With a sudden, savage movement, he plunged the knife into her chest. Naomi gasped, her eyes wide with shock as the blade tore through her body. Elijah's face was devoid of mercy as he pulled the knife out and struck again, this time in her abdomen. The room filled with the sickening sound of flesh tearing and her anguished cries. Naomi tried to crawl away, her blood pooling on the floor, but Elijah was relentless. Each stab was fueled by years of betrayal and humiliation. "You should have told me the truth," he shouted, his voice shaking with rage. "You should have stopped him." When Naomi finally lay still, her body a lifeless heap on the blood-soaked carpet, Elijah stepped back, panting heavily. The fire inside him didn't subside. It only shifted focus. There was still one more person who needed to face justice. The evening air was heavy as Elijah drove to Henry's house, his grip tight on the steering wheel. His mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and vengeance. The image of his lifeless wife burned into his memory. He had nothing left to lose, and in his eyes, justice demanded blood. Bursting through the door, Elijah found Henry sitting at the dining table, a cup of tea in hand and his Bible open in front of him. Startled, Henry looked up. "Elijah, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion and a flicker of fear. Elijah didn't respond. Instead, he threw the crumpled DNA results onto the table. "Explain this," he demanded, his voice low and simmering with rage. Henry's eyes darted to the paper and then back to Elijah. "I don't know what this is," he said, his voice faltering. "Don't you dare lie to me," Elijah snapped, his hands trembling. "You've been violating Naomi for years, haven't you? You fathered my children." Henry stood, raising his hands as though to calm his son. "Elijah, listen to me. It's not what you think. Don't lie." Elijah roared, his voice shaking the room. "You destroyed my family. You're a monster." Before Henry could speak again, Elijah lunged forward, plunging the knife into his father's side. Henry cried out, stumbling backward and clutching at the wound. Blood seeped through his shirt as he tried to steady himself, but Elijah didn't stop. With savage precision, Elijah stabbed him again and again, each thrust driven by years of pent-up rage. Henry collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain, his strength draining rapidly. "You deserve to feel the pain you inflicted on me," Elijah growled, standing over his father. Henry tried to crawl away, his breaths coming in short, desperate gasps, but his body was too weak to respond. Elijah knelt beside him, his voice cold and steady. "This is for Naomi. This is for the years of lies. This is for my children." Gripping the knife tightly, Elijah began the gruesome act of cutting off Henry's manhood. Henry's screams of agony filled the room, his body convulsing as blood pooled beneath him. Elijah's expression was stone cold, his focus unwavering as he carried out his grotesque retribution. The pain proved too much for Henry. His screams weakened, his body trembling violently before going limp. He exhaled one final, ragged breath and then was silent. Elijah dropped the knife, now slick with blood, and stumbled back, his chest heaving. The room reeked of iron and death, the echoes of Henry's torment still ringing in his ears. For a moment, he stood there, staring at the lifeless body of the man he had once called his father. But there was no relief, no satisfaction, only a hollow emptiness where his faith and family had once been. Elijah walked out of the house, his clothes soaked in blood. He sat on the front porch, the quiet neighborhood erupting in chaos when police arrived. Responding to frantic calls from neighbors who had heard horrifying screams and crashing noises, the officers approached cautiously, weapons drawn. Instead of resistance, they found Elijah sitting on Henry's front porch, drenched in blood, his Bible resting in his lap. Elijah's demeanor was chillingly calm. He looked up at the officers as they approached, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said simply, raising his hands in surrender. "God's justice has been served." The officers quickly handcuffed him, their unease palpable. As Elijah was led to the patrol car, one officer cautiously ventured inside the house. What they discovered was beyond words, a scene of unimaginable violence. Henry's body lay in a grotesque state, his chest riddled with stab wounds, his manhood cruelly severed. The pool of blood and the signs of struggle spoke volumes about the brutality of the act. As they placed Elijah into the back seat of the car, he turned to one of the officers, his voice steady, almost casual. "Naomi," he said, "you'll find her at our house. She betrayed me too." The officers exchanged shocked glances, realizing the full scale of the horrors they were dealing with. Rushing to Elijah's home, they found Naomi exactly as Elijah had described her. Her dismembered body lay in the living room, her remains scattered in a gruesome display of rage and methodical violence. Back at the station, Elijah provided a chillingly detailed confession, his voice devoid of emotion. "She lied to me for years," he said of Naomi. "And my father? He ruined everything I believed in. They had to face the consequences." His calm recounting of the murders stunned the investigators. When pressed on his actions, Elijah simply replied, "They destroyed our family. I just finished what they started." The dual crime scenes, the sheer brutality of the murders, and Elijah's cold composure sent shockwaves through the community. Their once revered preacher had become a figure of terror, leaving a devastating legacy of violence and betrayal in his wake. Elijah's trial drew national attention, a horrifying tale of betrayal, rage, and gruesome vengeance that captivated the public. The courtroom was packed with journalists, onlookers, and members of Elijah's former congregation, all eager to see how the justice system would handle the preacher-turned-murderer. The defense painted Elijah as a man driven to madness by unimaginable betrayal. They called on psychologists to testify about the trauma he endured upon learning the truth about his children's parentage and his father's abuse of Naomi. They described his actions as those of a man pushed past the limits of human endurance. The prosecution, however, focused on the premeditated and brutal nature of the murders, particularly the gruesome mutilation of his father. Prosecutors argued that while the betrayal he suffered was extreme, it could not justify the sheer violence of his actions. The jury deliberated for several days, weighing the horrific circumstances against the brutality of Elijah's crimes. In the end, they returned with a verdict of guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The judge, acknowledging the complexity of the case but bound by the law, sentenced Elijah to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Elijah's children, now orphans, were separated and placed in foster care, each struggling to come to terms with the horrific truths about their family. The once admired King family became a haunting cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how hidden secrets and betrayal can tear even the most devout lives apart. As Elijah was led out of the courtroom in shackles, he carried his Bible tightly in hand, muttering prayers to a God he believed had guided his actions. To the public, he became a symbol of the destructive power of secrets and rage, a tragic figure who lost everything in his quest for justice. Elijah King's descent from a pillar of faith to a figure of horror serves as a chilling testament to the destructive power of secrets and betrayal. Even the most revered individuals are not immune to the chaos hidden truths can unleash. The story of Elijah King is a chilling reminder of how unchecked emotions and hidden truths can lead to unimaginable tragedy. Anger, while a natural response to betrayal, is a force that, if left uncontrolled, can destroy everything in its path. Elijah's rage, though fueled by pain and betrayal, blinded him to reason and pushed him to commit acts that shattered not only his life, but also those of everyone around him. This story also underscores the importance of honesty and addressing problems before they spiral out of control. Naomi and Henry's decision to conceal the truth created a web of lies that ensnared everyone, ultimately leading to devastation. It's a sobering lesson in the power of truth, not just for healing, but for preventing the kind of heartbreak and destruction that arises when secrets fester. No matter how difficult the truth may be, confronting it is always better than letting it grow into a monster that consumes everything in its wake. And when you feel anger rising, remember, taking a step back to reflect can mean the difference between making a choice you'll regret and finding a path toward resolution. If this story made you think about the destructive power of secrets, the importance of honesty, or the way anger can spiral out of control, then don't just leave without taking action. At True Crime IQ, we bring you stories that aren't just about crime. They're about the lessons we can all learn from the darkest moments of human experience. Your support keeps these stories alive. So, if you're here right now, don't let this connection slip away. Subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you're not just following a channel. You're joining a community that seeks truth, reflection, and the strength to face life's toughest challenges. You've stayed with us this far, so why not take one small step to ensure you never miss another story like this? Hit that subscribe button now and help us grow. It's the least you can do to keep these important lessons alive. Thank you for watching.